Hello and welcome to No Notes, the show where three cerebral cinephiles take a break from chatting guilty pleasures to discuss cinematic treasures. Each month, we'll take turns selecting a film we believe to be virtually flawless, one that's had a significant impact on our lives and or helped shape the film lover that we've become. If you love movies, if you really love movies, then this is the show for you. My name is Stephanie, and I'm one of your hosts on this journey of great cinematic exploration. I'm joined by my two fellow film heads, Kelly and Jack. Now, for our premiere episode, I had the distinct honor of selecting the film for us to dissect, respect, and reflect on, and I chose My Neighbor Totoro. If you haven't listened to that episode, it was a magical journey into a masterpiece, and I highly recommend you check it out. But this week, it's Kelly's turn to take the reins. She's going to share the film she picked that sets her heart ablaze and briefly tee up why she considers it worthy of No Notes designation. Then Jack and I will weigh in with our thoughts, and together, the three of us will determine if Kelly's cherished celluloid indeed belongs in the pantheon of movie masterpieces. Kelly, the stage is set for you to start the show.
Gather round, my babies, and I'll tell you a tale. The story of a girl, the breakup that broke her, the movie that saved her, and the melodramatic tendencies that made her phrase any of this way. I saw Phantom of the Paradise for the first time in the summer of 2010, or what I have oft referred to as the summer of my discontent. It was a rough time. My mom was diagnosed and subsequently treated for and recovered from cancer. I went through a hard breakup and I felt stalled. I wasn't sleeping much, and as has been the case for me for pretty much as long as I can remember, I drowned my sorrow in horror films. The name The Phantom of the Paradise kept popping up and it piqued my curiosity. It wasn't quite as easy to see everything back then, so I had to get a little sneaky. I no longer remember the website I used to watch it, but I know it wasn't super legit. It got the job done, though, streaming through a choppy internet connection in a hot room. I was instantly in love. A lot of people saved my life that summer, and the art wouldn't have hit as hard without their guidance, but Phantom of the Paradise was very much a part of that redemption. The next day, I showed my mom. The day after that, I started looking for a hard copy. It was a bit elusive at that time, and I had to order both the DVD and the soundtrack, which I needed, from Germany. And I didn't care. It was worth it. Because nothing was weirder, wilder, more wonderful than Phantom of the Paradise, and what is, I contend, one of the greatest soundtracks to ever pass quietly through pop culture. Jesus Christ, Paul Williams went hard. I have since bought digital copies of both the movie and the soundtrack. I own a Death Records t-shirt. I now give Brian De Palma the benefit of the doubt based simply on Phantom, and it is mostly paid off, give or take. This movie means everything to me. It's so fearless and bold and absolutely has that fuck you, I'm doing everything I want energy you rarely see in movies anymore. Not faulting young filmmakers, you need to prove yourself viable, and weird swings won't necessarily provide that evidence. But God, it's amazing. Paul Williams is so funny, the visuals are so striking, the soundtrack is so catchy. There's no lesson, and I love every goddamn second of it. Tip to taint, no notes. Steph, what do you got?
Ooh, I don't want to follow that. Jeez, that was a beautiful intro. Shit. Okay, guys, I need to offer a disclaimer at this point. I have probably 15 pages of notes on this film.
That's the opposite of the name of our podcast.
Well, I have notes that talk about how much I think this is a no-notes film. How about that?
I love it.
I am going to try to figure out where I want to go. I might be a little all over the place because there is so much I want to say, and I obviously won't say it all right now. But basically, let me try to start. So, not long after Brian De Palma was kicked off his first major studio picture, he made this deliciously scathing satire on the music industry that was originally intended to be an FU to the film industry he felt treated him so badly. So already, just going in, it has that renegade spirit that you can feel throughout this film. Despite pulling from a ton of beloved source material and literary classics, it still feels wildly original. And that is in large part due to its bombastic ambition, a remarkably talented cast, and the brilliance of a future filmmaking legend just entering the scene, a mere 2 years before he'd make the horror classic Carrie. Made on a tiny budget, De Palma embraces the camp in a way that makes this a giddy, joy-inducing romp, but still elevates the film far above your typical cult flick, with artful camera work including his now famous split-screen style, a masterful control of pacing, an eye for spectacular set design and costumes, and a compelling story that smartly skewers greed and the soulless commercialization of art without ever feeling preachy or for even 1 second remotely dull. Phantom of the Paradise was never commercially or critically successful, but it has had a huge influence on later artists. I think we all know how I feel about director Guillermo del Toro. And if you don't know how I feel about him, go listen to our Crimson Peak episode. But he is a favorite of mine. And when he was a teenager in Mexico City, he waited in line for Paul Williams to sign his copy of the Phantom of the Paradise soundtrack. Many years later, he asked Williams to write the lyrics to the stage adaptation of Pan's Labyrinth, which for me kind of says everything. Edgar Wright, who I also love, also cites this as a huge influence. The film also heavily influenced one of my favorite horror musicals, Repo the Genetic Opera. Daft Punk claimed to have seen this movie together more than 20 times, and you could easily make a case that this film is at least partially responsible for the birth of electronic music. 50 years later, it still feels incredibly relevant, with its spot-on story of monsters and sellouts. It's a cynical but accurate look at the fame game, perfectly encapsulated by the Paul Williams song that plays over the end credits and punctuates the film. Nothing matters anyway, and that's the hell of it. Strange, epic, beautiful, exceedingly original, uncannily prescient in its ability to predict musical trends, wickedly smart, outrageously funny, and boasting an unforgettable soundtrack. It's the kind of film that inspires and deserves passionate fandoms. No notes. Jack, over to you.
Jesus fucking Christ. How am I supposed to follow either of those two things?
Follow your heart.
Yeah, well, I will. And I didn't write any of that down. I'm not going to be eloquent, or I'm not going to be like, it's just watch the movie. You have to watch this movie. I remember seeing it. I did remember it, watching it. I was like, oh yes, I have seen this. This was a long time ago, mind you. Back when I was watching Rocky Horror Picture Show pretty religiously as well. So I know that that's where this stemmed from, where it was like, hey, if you like this, you like Rocky, you'll love this one too. And I did. And it's funny watching it now as an adult where it brings it all back. It's like, oh yes, I did see this movie. And I guess maybe because it didn't have the same cultural impact as Rocky, where it didn't have the broad theater appeal where people were in the theater, throwing things at the screen and reenacting where Rocky had that. And so that was very much a prevalent thing where I lived, where you could go see Rocky. And this didn't really have that here. Apparently that was in Winnipeg only.
Winnipeg, yeah.
Yeah, not here. But either way, it just fucking fantastic movie. It is unlike, I think, anything that's ever been done. You can't really compare it to anything. You can say, yeah, there's parallels to Rocky Horror. There's parallels to Repo. But considering that this film came out technically a year before Rocky Horror, the film came out, but was running concurrently in theaters while Rocky, the Broadway or the off-Broadway, London show was premiering. There wasn't anything like it. And to this day, 50 years later, there still really isn't anything like it. I mean, you could say like Repo is close and it does kind of have that same vibe, but we talk about the prescience. We talk about, this was well before reality TV was a thing. This was well before kind of that pop stardom was really kind of in the public eye and kind of in the way that it scathingly looks at it and makes it like, hey, you know what, if you're going to try to be famous, you're going to make a Faustian deal, and I just love how prescient that was well before its time. They cite the costumes in this movie as basically setting the scene for the punk music renaissance that happened very soon after, with the ripped fishnets and the gaudy colors and all that stuff. It's and the colorful hair. This movie kind of set that stage, if you will. So it's I guess its cultural impact can't just be limited to just movies and to just say, hey, this was De Palma, basically giving his finger to the industry. It had ripple effects across multiple mediums, and I think that it has to be kind of commented on, that this movie was, it wasn't a very big moneymaker. Obviously, it was kind of a dud, but it's a cult classic now, and very much deservingly so. And so, Like I said, I don't have anything eloquent to say other than this movie is fucking amazing. And if you have not seen it, you need to do yourself a favor and rectify that right now.
I'm not going to lie to you. I'm like punching the air in victory that this got the love that it did, because I can't be objective about this movie. I love it so fucking much. It's kind of bonkers. I've seen it at a mausoleum in Philadelphia with Jessica Harper in attendance. I got posters. I've got all of it. I kind of go crazy for this movie and use it as one of my, if you don't like this, you might not like me movies. So I guess since I picked it, my question to both of you would be, what's your background with De Palma?
I remember I went to film school when I first went to college. And obviously he was somebody that we studied quite a bit. And I remember watching The Untouchables for the first time and just being like,
so good.
Holy fucking shit. Obviously Carrie, huge influence. So, I'm not going to say he doesn't have any misses, but he's pretty consistently stellar. But it was a pretty long time into my cinematic exploration before I discovered Phantom of the Paradise. And I'm actually embarrassed about how long it took me to discover this film and to realize it existed and to realize that it was something that was essential to be in my life. I
don't think you should be embarrassed by that at all. Like, this movie flies well below the radar for most people.
It does. And there should never be gatekeeping. You come into it when you come into it, and you love it just as much
you find
as
it when you find it.
Yeah, exactly.
And I guess when I say shame, it's not that that's probably the wrong word. I think it's just criminal how underrated it is and how far under the radar it flies, because I was a big fan of things like Rocky Horror Picture Show and cult films, and the weirder the better. I was always seeking out like weird, off-kilter stuff. I still do. But especially when I was first kind of really developing my love of film in my younger days. And for this to have not been a film that I would have watched very early on, just given how much it speaks to me and how perfect I think it is and how it checks pretty much every box that I have when it comes to these kind of films. Is crazy. When I saw it, I was like, I think just mind absolutely blown. I was like, how does this film exist, first of all? And how is it so good? And does nobody talk about it, or almost nobody? How is it just not at the same level, if not exceeding the level of Rocky Horror Picture Show? Because it is on par. And I think some could argue it's, superior to Rocky Horror, which is hard to say because I love Rocky Horror. But this film is just, I don't want to throw this word around, even though I do, but it's a goddamn masterpiece. And
yes,
it's changed my life when I first saw it. I've seen it several times, and every time I watch it, I love it more. So that was a long-winded answer to your question, but sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Jack, I promise I want to get to your De Palma history. I just want to really quickly interject something about what you said, Steph, regarding the Rocky Horror of it all, which is, there are two movies. I love Rocky Horror, of course. Like, you can't really do what we do and not love Rocky Horror. But there are two movies that I always think I don't quite understand why they never took hold of the cult imagination the way Rocky Horror did. And they are this and Hedwig and the Angry Inch, which I think is just an astonishingly great movie with a fantastic score. And I think that in both cases, it might be that Rocky just has a slightly lighter touch. It's more high camp. This is certainly camp, but it snarls a little bit. It's kind of like camp dipped in acid. It's got a real like punk rock fuck you vibe to it that I think Rocky is a little bit more like, aw, punk rock, fuck you. It's not so angry. And
right.
I can't believe that as a young filmmaker, the butter beans that Brian De Palma had to make this movie. It's just amazing and to me awe-inspiring that as young and new as he was like, fuck it. I'm making this goddamn movie.
I've been watching movies, obviously, my whole life. I grew up, my mom was very lenient about what movies came home with me. So when I was young, I was watching Rocky Horror Picture Show. I was watching Eddie Murphy Raw, which is like, I don't remember how young I was, but I was young and had no business watching that kind of, stand-up at the time. But, that was the thing that we did. We didn't have a lot of money. So it was movie rentals was our, let's go splurge. And so I remember seeing like I mean, Carrie, obviously, The Fury, Dressed to Kill. I think I watched that one when she wasn't like aware, because that one was kind of naughty. But
Yes.
Scarface and Body Double, like that Body Double especially. But all these movies, right? And then of course The Untouchables came out, and that was one of those ones that was in constant rotation at my house. We always watched The Untouchables. We owned it on VHS because that's how much we love this movie. And of course, I followed his films afterwards, even like Bonfire of the Vanities, which was, but like Carlito's Way was fantastic. And of course, when Mission Impossible came out, it was like, holy shit, like he just reinvigorated this old television show in a very neo-noir-esque, but very Brian De Palma way. And then like even with Snake Eyes, when that came out in the theater, before Nick Cage was really Nick Cage, and he was in this movie. And it was fucking incredible, because Gary Sinise and everybody knew who that was back then. And it was kind of an all-star cast at the time. Great film. And so I've always kind of I've gravitated towards his movies, because universally, outside of a couple Mission to Mars and a couple other ones, they really are quite good.
I'm glad you both mentioned The Untouchables, because if I'm being totally honest, I think it's probably actually De Palma's best movie, even though Phantom of the Paradise is my favorite De Palma movie. I think there is something undeniable about The Untouchables. It's incredible. I watched it all the way through the first time this year, and I was just gobsmacked. I was like, there's a reason people still talk about this movie all the time, and it's because it's absolutely incredible. And I think how that ties into Phantom of the Paradise is that really in this very early outing from De Palma, you can see this just mastery of pacing, of action, of suspense, even though it's kind of silly in a lot of ways, and intentionally so. I mean, beef is murdered by a plunger. It's very clearly he's being kind of tongue-in-cheek, but he still manages to build the suspense. And I think when you see him doing the split screen thing with the bomb in the car and Winslow like moving around backstage, it's just a real mastery of form that a lot of people have imitated since he did that, and never been able to replicate with the skill that De Palma did.
I not to derail us, but I'm not going to say the name of it, but I just watched a film that I'm reviewing, and it's kind of a mess. It's sort of all over the place. Totally. It tries to be like 10 different things. And you're like, oh, what are you trying to do? And for most times when I watch a film like that, I'm like, okay, like pick a lane and stay in it. Or this feels sloppy. It feels like you don't know what you're trying to be here. And so you're trying to be everything, and none of it works. And I see that so often, but this is a film that is so many things, but it is this masterful stylistic balancing act that you almost never, ever see in films. Like it drifts between genres. It goes from like expressionist horror to slapstick comedy to searing melodrama to like, it's just all over the place, and all of it works, and it works so beautifully. And I can think of almost no examples of a film that does that and does it so well and doesn't feel like it's a mess or it's all over the place. It feels like it's all perfectly orchestrated. And I think that's just miraculous.
Yeah, it's
I would
De
have
Palma
never
doing what he
personally-
does best. Like there's only a handful of directors that could pull something like that off and balance all of those tones and like blend them seamlessly into this film that succeeds in all the levels, while allowing each of those little nuances their moment to shine, but then kind of stitching them back into the overarching narrative. There's not a lot of directors that could really pull it off in a way that was, I guess, organic and that worked as well as it does in Phantom.
And it feels like De Palma. Not every director has that thing that, like, when you watch their movie, you're like, yes, I can feel this. I can feel 100% the hand behind this. I would say, I think Fincher has that. I think, obviously, De Palma, Carpenter, Ari Aster, and Mike Flanagan are starting to develop that, as is Jordan Peele. But I think, like, you can't see a De Palma movie and not immediately think, that's De Palma. What you can see is a lot of people trying very hard to crib that style and to replicate it. And it makes you appreciate just how delicate what he's doing is. The strange bursts of humor that counterbalance the bursts of incredible violence. The fact that Phantom includes extremely kind of like goofy slapstick humor, but also has come up with the brilliant idea that I would have never come up with to merge the stories of the Phantom of the Opera and Faust into this kind of epic, tragic story, but that has Paul Williams, who's a living Muppet, playing Swan, the villain, and the dorkiest looking human alive playing Winslow Leach. Like, it's so amazing how it all works. And I feel like if you take all of the pieces apart, if you disassemble this strange little Lego castle, you could never put it back together again to make it make sense. But somehow he made the pieces fit, and it's just so fucking perfect. I know I keep saying that, and I apologize, but it's just like,
don't apologize.
Any of those on their own wouldn't be anything to write home about. It would just be another ho-hum musical. Would be just another ho-hum, revenge tale. And yet the fact that they all come together as well as they do, you're right. If you took it apart and tried to reassemble it a different way, it would never go back like it was supposed to. I think this was kind of one of those, we talk about, the swinging for the fences every now and again. And I think this was a big swing, and it just, everything jived in the way that it needed to, even though it didn't make a lot of money and even though it doesn't get the love that it deserved. This was, I think, very much exactly the movie he was trying to make, and he nailed it, knocked it out of the park. And, the fact that I think it's more prescient now than when it was released speaks volumes to everybody that was involved with it and their vision for the film, and the fact that I think I would dare say that it's probably better now than when it was released. It just I think it fits with what's going on in the world better. We've had more time to look back and go, yeah, this is a unrecognized masterpiece, and so it's, yeah, I agree. There's no way that you could replicate this, I think.
And I think a little bit to add to what you're saying, Jack, I don't use this phrase a lot because I think it's kind of a cheap way out, but I don't think this movie could be made today, not because of the political climate or anything like that. I actually just think it couldn't be made today because I think it would have trouble finding funding. I think that there are plenty of filmmakers who would like to make a totally off the walls bonker shit, and I think they have the talent and the ability to, and I think there's plenty of audiences who would love it. But especially with the way that we're getting more like an oligarchy of studios, it's harder to get the money to make these like deeply strange little visionary films.
Yep. The creators have to fund it themselves. Steph mentioned Repo, the genetic opera, and that this, I get, the only modern-ish equivalent that I can think of to Phantom is that movie. And it doesn't feel like a De Palma film, obviously, because it's not. And it definitely feels a little cheaper. But that's by nature of the fact that, they didn't have the studio backing that he did. This was very much a labor of love. And so, yeah, I agree with you. I don't think it's very, very difficult to, especially in the modern times where, every now and again you'll get a musical and it kind of hits home, but you'll have these big name actors in it. You'll have Ryan Gosling and all this stuff. And it's like, okay, that's great. And that's cool that musicals get their moment in the sun, but it's all about star power at that point. It's no longer an auteur kind of vision. It's studio driven. We're going to put all these really attractive people in this movie, and everybody's going to come to see it because they love these people and they want to see them sing and fall in love to music. And it's like, that's great. And I love that musicals get at least a little bit of love, but yeah, not like this, not in this kind of fashion, not anymore.
And to what you're saying too, like Paul Williams is an amazing songwriter who has a crazy resume under his belt. Like,
oh yeah,
there are so many songs people love that they have no idea he's the person who wrote. I'm sure you guys know, but The Rainbow Connection is a Paul Williams song. We've Only Just Begun. There's Bowie. Yeah, he's written so many songs that you love and you just don't know he's written them. But when you look at him, he's, I think, 4'11", and he's just this strange little blonde gnome who apparently when he was on The Muppet Show, Jim Henson said he was great with the Muppets because he was a Muppet. And nobody recognizes him on sight except me because I love him so much. But none of the actors were proven draws. Jessica Harper would eventually be in Suspiria. I don't know. Was that before or after? Do you guys know?
After.
That was after this.
This was her first film, yeah.
And she's been in a few other things where she's great. She's really fantastic. But I don't know that even now she'd necessarily be somebody who, other than horror audiences, would pull in a large crowd. So it was a movie that had no real star power, and it was just so crazy. So many wild swings.
I read an interview with Paul Williams. It was really great. And he was talking about how the casting of Jessica and that she beat out Linda Ronstadt for the part.
What, really?
And
That's so fantastic.
You know, they were asking about it. They were like, well, what was so great about her? And he's like, well, I think part of it is that she was an unknown and that was really important in the casting process, is to get people that would just embody the role completely and you wouldn't be distracted by their celebrity.
When she opens her mouth and sings for the first time, you're like, oh, wow, that's not what I was expecting from this tiny woman, this like low voice that's just really smooth. And I think that, again, one of the advantages to having a really great composer is that Paul Williams wrote songs that I think worked well with her range. So when she does Old Souls, you're like, wow, this woman is doing something pretty powerful right now. I hope you guys appreciate how much I'm holding back my soundtrack enthusiasm.
Let it
because
rip.
It's
I've
like
been listening
trying
to the
to
soundtrack
bowl out.
like constantly. Like I've had it on repeat since I watched this. It's really that good.
Do you want to shift into the soundtrack, or do you have some more things you want to talk about the film first?
Steph, I could talk about every aspect of this movie for like 7 days straight. I will transition into soundtrack with the caveat that at any point, if we want to jump out, I'm like 1 foot out the door. Fair?
As long as we spend some time talking about Beef, then I am good following.
I could talk about Beef for 7 days by himself.
Me too.
I laughed so hard at almost everything he said and did. When he's doing like the Frankenstein movement across the stage in the ripped pants. So good. It's such a good physical comedy performance.
I wrote down, I was like, I do have no notes on this film, but if I had any note, it would be that I wanted more Beef, even though I think they actually gave us the perfect amount, because you don't want to overuse a character like that. But every minute, every second he's on this screen is just mesmerizing, and I can't get enough.
I wrote down that I want deer antler belt like Beef has in this movie. I don't know why. I don't really want it, but I so fucking want that belt. Like, yeah.
Very shortly after I saw this movie, I was listening to the entire soundtrack all the time, and I was watching it on YouTube. And I was watching, I think, Life at Last, one of the Beef songs. And one of the comments was just, dicks out for Beef. So now whenever I think of Beef, I just think, dicks out for Beef.
Yet another thing that we need on a shirt. We need to open our own store and then just put all this shit on
shirts. We should have no notes and guilty pleasures merch. That would be fucking awesome.
Except for I don't write this stuff down, so I forget about it as soon as it passes. But we should start taking notes on our brilliant ideas.
Take notes on our no notes.
Notes on our own no notes podcast.
Noted.
Duly noted on the no notes. Check.
All right, music. So, let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so I have a ridiculous amount to say about it. I first want to, again, draw attention to how good Paul Williams is, because he's writing in a wide range of genres for this movie. He does like a surf rock song. He does one of those 1950s dead teenager ballads.
Mm-hmm.
He does Faust, which is just like a perfect song. Like I hesitate to use this phrase, but no notes. Like he writes glam rock. He writes kind of proto metal almost for Beef to sing. He's dipping in and out of all of these genres, and he's doing them incredibly. And if you pay as much attention as I have, which some would argue is way too much attention, he uses the basic motif of Faust in almost all of those songs to bind them together. And that phrase, "I was not myself last night," comes up repeatedly in each of the songs.
Well, and it's for most of them, it's like it's supposed to be like the same song that just keeps getting like bastardized by all these different acts. And it's amazing because they all sound wildly differently, but that's like the point is that they're all misinterpreting his vision until, Phoenix actually sings and she does exactly what he wants. But before that, it's like Beef interpreting it, with Swan telling him like, make it your own. And then he does. And it's like absolutely insane and ridiculous, but it's all like the same. It's supposed to be the same, like, framework, which is so brilliant.
When the Beach Boys band does it, it's called Upholstery. And if you listen closely, you can hear like the basic framework is there, but they change it so much to sound like this surf rock song. And it absolutely, like, my dad listened to a lot of surf rock when I was a kid, and it sounds like something he'd listen to.
It's very close. Yeah.
It's so good.
And then
It's so authentic.
Song, Goodbye Eddie, Goodbye is very
I love
doo-wop.
that
It is
song.
so
Oh my
doo-wop,
God.
and it's so fucking perfect that, like, if you
listen to the words to that song, it is so scathing of the music industry.
But if you didn't know that this was from a soundtrack and you just kind of heard it on the radio, kind of half heard it, you would not know that it didn't belong in that era. Like, it just fits.
Such a bop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I love, like, that he has those same 3 actors playing, like, all the different bands, and they go from, like, greaser rock to surf satire to glam rock, and they keep, like, you know, evolving. And it's really his commentary on, you know, the more things change, the more they stay the same, that these musicians and these rock pop idols come and go, and there's always this latest craze and the next big thing. But from an industry standpoint, they're all interchangeable. It's all just dollar signs and marketing, and the machine comes first, always, you know.
And I love how it's Paul Williams, it's his backing band. It's like, these are the people that he toured with when he's writing his own music and singing his own songs. And he's like, because I think the studio was, hey, we need to get somebody to record these songs, you know, with you. We need to get a band. We need to get somebody known. And he's like, no, we're using my guys, you know. And I think that's just fucking brilliant.
Yeah, the thing for me, I went into this not knowing who Paul Williams was. This was my first exposure to him. I loved his music, and I didn't know I loved his music. Because I'm a huge Muppets fan, which I'm going to guess anybody who's listened to this podcast to any degree kind of isn't surprised to find out I've got real Muppet Girl vibes. But I think that every song he's ever written for Jim Henson is brilliant. But, like, the idea that the guy who wrote We've Only Just Begun for a bank commercial of all things also wrote that whole weird little rock opera at the end, which I wanted more of. I don't know about you guys, but, like, I wanted to see that thing on stage, like the Frankenstein of it all, and like the totally absolutely crazy, but the music's amazing. But it's really glam rocky, and it's actually pretty hard glam rock in a way that I wasn't at all ready for. And I think that what it drew out is how important having the right collaborators can be to making something great. Because, like, I don't necessarily want to shit on La La Land, but I'm gonna. There's a lot of talk about, like, great songwriting in that, and, like, it's fine. It's okay. But if you're going to say over and over again how great a piece of work of any kind is, whether it's songwriting or whether it's a painting or whether it's a piece of literature, like, you got to be able to back it up and have something really, really great. And I think De Palma was smart. I think the music is so good, which is why I had to immediately buy the soundtrack from Germany. And I still listen to it all the time, because every time I listen to it, I'm like, this is amazing. There's nothing wrong here. So, what did you guys think of, like, did you have a favorite character? Did you have a favorite part? I obviously, Swan is my favorite character, but, like, what really grabbed you?
Well, I mean, I think I've already sort of shown my hand here a little bit. I mean, when Beef enters the fray, I am just absolutely captivated. And he is such a just over the top, delicious, just campy in the best possible way character. Every word that comes out of his mouth, I'm hanging on it. He obviously gets, you know, one of the best scenes with the Brilliant Psycho reference that is just, like, the best thing ever, his in the shower scene. And he's not in it a whole lot. It's a pretty, like, short span of the film, but it is, every time I rewatch it, I'm just like, it never loses its, like, joy-inducing factor for me. So he's definitely a huge highlight for me. Not that
his
there aren't
facial
many
contortions
highlights
alone should inspire other actors, I think. What he does
for some reason,
face, you know.
Oh yeah, he's so good. And for some reason, and I genuinely don't even know why, the fact that he wears a shower cap when he showers makes me laugh so hard. But I think De Palma may have actually put the exact right amount of beef in, because I think he's, like, right on the line of being kind of offensive.
Yeah. I do think you probably couldn't get away with it nowadays.
No. And if there was any more, I think it would have been too much. It would have soured it. Yeah.
I agree.
I don't
He's
know.
very
For
funny,
me,
and I do
that's
love
a
him.
tough one because obviously Swan's fucking awesome. Like just the whole schmarmy, sleazy kind of. He's so disinterested in everything that's happening. It's like he couldn't be bothered. He could care less, because he essentially really doesn't give a shit. I mean, it's you watch the movie and you find out why he doesn't care. But it's and like how conceited he is that he can't stand perfection in anything other than himself. So he's going to relegate this wonderful singer to fucking like the backup chorus. And Swan is fantastic, but
I love how that reveals such a like insecurity. Like, he's like this like manipulative, sleazy, gross dude, but also at the end of the day, he's just very, very insecure. And I think that that's true of a lot of people who are just complete maniacal assholes. And
Yep.
I really love the way that they portrayed that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. No, and so outside of that, I'd be happy Winslow just because he's such a oddball kind of goofball choice for kind of this lead role, where you're supposed to be like commiserating with him. You're supposed to feel bad for him, and yet you kind of don't because he's just this weird fucker. He's just off and goofy and kind of a little overbearing and a little much, but you can't help but feel his plight, And then of course he goes full Phantom and just goes completely unfucking hinged, which is fantastic. And I think that's the only way that character would have worked. You had to go like all in, and so the fact that he does that, I think it just because you look at him and you go, there's no way in hell. Like if you just saw the cast lined up, you would not think that he was the hero. You'd think the Beef was the hero or somebody like that was more the main guy, and it's like, no, it's just this goofy fucking dude with these huge bottle cap glasses who just wants to play his music. He loves his music. It's so good. He just wants to be seen. And then of course he just gets absolutely screwed every which way to Sunday in this movie. And he loses his shit. And it's great. And I love the fact that if you look at it, you have to wonder, did like George Lucas watch this movie and fucking rip off part of it for Vader? Because like if you look and when he's in the recording studio, especially he's all geared up and he's got the vocoder on his chest, and Swan's got him dialed in and everything, and it's like his raspy breathing, and it's like, Jesus Christ, this is fucking Vader before Vader was Vader. Like that is, it's I don't know. It's just
I'm sitting over here like vibrating with so much to say.
Oh my God!
Well,
I'm sorry. Let me say one thing. I was going to say
please
that.
Go ahead.
If we're going to count the design of Phantom as a character in and of itself, which I do, that is immediately skyrockets to the top, because when I saw that design, I was like, this is it's just cool as hell. It's very unusual. It's a really, it's super low budget, but it's just really brilliantly executed. I love the way Phantom looks, and I love how they get him there. It's so great.
It's been robbed, anime especially. There's been quite a few anime that have taken that character design, and if like you kind of scroll through, like there's some characters that are almost spitting images of Phantom that they have kind of lifted that design for their hero characters. So the appeal of that look is very, very widespread.
Kelly, you're vibrating. You should go.
I really am. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just have like so much to say.
Don't be sorry.
First, before I forget this, Jack, you really may be right about the Vader thing. I assume this is kind of like commonly known lore at this point, so I apologize, but I'm still going to put it out there. De Palma and Lucas shared a casting session for Carrie and Star Wars. So it's definitely likely that Lucas was very aware of De Palma's work. It's kind of one of those like great pieces of lore that like if things had gone differently, Sissy Spacek could have been Leia, and Harrison Ford might have been the John Travolta role, whose character name I don't remember. I just remember he slapped women a lot in that movie. A lot of woman slapping in Carrie. So, it's definitely likely that he was aware of De Palma's work and that was on his radar. And I think you've got like a really interesting point in that like both of them kind of are wearing like black leather bondage gear too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
On the nether regions.
Yeah, and they both have a cape.
Tell me more.
If you stand them up next to each other, there's
some similarities
enough similarity
for sure.
there that it's like that can't be coincidental. Like that just cannot.
Yeah. With the caveat that I think the Phantom looks 100% cooler. I also think in an interesting way, he's almost the first Phantom that's ever been created in a form of media besides Lon Chaney that actually looks like how Gaston Leroux wanted the Phantom to look, in that, like, his whole face is fucked up. His mask covers pretty much his entire face. And it's not like half of my face is super hot. I'm Gerard Butler. Look at my pretty face. It's just like, hey, my whole face has been ruined in a record press. So no, I'm not going to let you see any of it.
The only thing I wanted more... go ahead, Steph.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that reminds me of, I don't want to derail us, but you guys both saw Voyage of the Demeter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Loved it so much.
Yeah, I thought you might. So it's that similar vibe of like you actually get a Dracula who's pretty terrifying and grotesque and horrifying.
Yes.
And now, granted, I love me a sexy romantic Dracula. I was all like, is this what Gary Oldman looks like when he's not Gary Oldman? I don't like it. But from a like literary adaptation, it's like so brilliantly done. And this is a similar thing of like, these are horror characters that are meant to be like horrifying and terrifying. And this actually kind of nails that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I to your point with the Demeter, I loved it because it made Dracula a monster again.
Right.
And I feel kind of the same way about Winslow, because also to what Jack was saying about him being just like a little creepy, like he met Phoenix once in an audition line and she was nice to him and he's instantly like, I will dedicate my entire world to you. And part of what I like about it is that it doesn't necessarily play that as romantic. It plays it as a little bit too much. Like, it's a little over the top.
Any of it. Yep. Yeah.
But the other thing it does that's kind of interesting that harkens back a little bit more to Leroux than other interpretations of the Phantom is that, like, even though he is obsessed with Phoenix, it does suggest repeatedly that he's more invested in his cantata.
Yeah.
Like, his music is really the driving force and his presentation of his music. And I think probably as like an artistic weirdo who wanted to make a movie he wanted to make, De Palma was probably doing a little bit of projection of like, how do I get the thing I want made without any kind of interference from these outside forces that can make or break me?
The opening and closing songs of this film, I think, intentionally really encapsulate the major themes of the film. And like sandwiched between a ton of bops, as we've talked about, there's this like sneaky bit of heartbreak and horror. And like you have the opening song, Goodbye Eddie Goodbye, which sounds massively like a bop. Like you just want to get up and dance to it. You want to sing along to it. It's really fun. But Kelly, as you mentioned, it's really, the lyrics are really dark and twisted. But the theme of that song is the theme of the film, which is giving everything up for music and love. And then the closing song, The Hell of It, is this really grim song about how life just uses you up and spits you out and no one really cares. And in the end, nothing really matters. And so like there's a line in the beginning of the song that says the intro song that says, we'll remember you forever. And then there's a line in the last song that says, we're glad you're gone. And it is like that whole full circle of the rise to fame and how like you're everything and then you're nothing. And in the end, nobody gives a shit about you. You're just a commodity. And that, like, that's so dark and fucked up, but also really fucking brilliant. And the way that they sort of, I want to say like they bury it. I mean, it is definitely, you're meant to.
You only hear it if you stay for the credits.
Well, and you only hear it, I think, if you really are focused on it and focused on like what the lyrics are and really thinking about it. Because if you just listen to it, you're like, oh, this is really fun. And this is really like silly and it's a romp and it's campy and it's over the top. But like, if you peel back the layers, there is this like brilliance and this darkness and this like so poignant skewering of what it means to be in the industry. And I found that like just really, not only are those both fantastic songs and two of my absolute favorites, but I love the way they sort of tell the story of the film in this really sort of subtle, unexpected way.
Well, and Swan brings that up several times throughout the movie too, where he talks about like nobody cares about nostalgia. You know, we're not in it for nostalgia. You know, that's yesterday, or but not the exact words, but he mentions that several times. It's like, yeah, that's the past. We don't care about that. Yep, you were big. I mean, in fact, he's even in the beginning when Winslow is talking. Is it Winslow? Not Winslow. His
the beefy manager guy who turned Annette into the dirty money grubbing horse she is today.
Philbin. He's talking about to Philbin, and Philbin's talking about their previous protege that made it big, and he's like, that's yeah, sure, she's a big thing today. She won't be tomorrow. Like, it's just so blasé and so yep, it doesn't matter. None of this matters. That's fantastic that you're successful. Tomorrow you're nobody and you're forgotten. So that comes up several times in the movies, and I think that is very much a scathing look at not just obviously the music industry, but I think any industry.
Mm-hmm. I apologize so much for what I'm about to do, but we're going into Paul Williams' corner. First, to address The Hell of It, which is a great song. And if anybody's listening to this and hasn't heard it, I really, really recommend just listening to it and really paying attention to the lyrics and remembering that the same guy who wrote We've Only Just Begun wrote this horrifically mean-spirited song. Amazingly mean-spirited, nasty song. There's a part that I don't remember the exact words, but it's something about you're bad in bed, nobody likes you, you're better off dead.
Yes.
But it's all over this like kind of sprightly piano tune that sounds a little bit like the song he did for Bugsy Malone. You give a little love and it all comes back to you. I am going to pivot a little bit from talking about his music, because I've talked about that a lot, and obviously I think it's amazing, to talking about his actual acting performance. And I'm going to ask your opinion, Steph and Jack. I feel like he's really like riveting in the movie, but I'm wondering if maybe part of the reason he's as good as he is because he's worked in the music industry for quite a while at that point. So he's maybe dealt with a lot of the kinds of people who Swan is based off of, and maybe it's kind of a way for him to vent his ire and his own frustration at the industry. Thoughts?
Agreed. Yeah, I think when you're in that, whether you're successful in that business or not, I think that is. You're going to see it. You're going to experience it. You're going to be around it. And I think having that history with it, where he has been with these megastars and recorded and seen the seedy underbelly of the music industry and the pop industry and fame, I think he is channeling that, because I'm sure he's been right next to it the entire time. So I mean, I'm sure he's a lovely gentleman in real life, but he does pull off that kind of disillusioned, kind of disassociated, schmarmy, kind of slimy, record producing mogul, if you will, very, very, very well.
Well, he started off, when he first started his career, he was going to be an actor. Like, that's what he wanted to do. He wasn't in music. But because he was short and because he didn't have conventional good looks, really all he was going to ever be was just like a weird character actor. Yeah. And so he was like, well, I think he was already sort of shunned by the industry a little bit, where he was like, oh, you don't have the right look. You're not who we're looking for. And that's when he started making music. And so I think this is a really interesting and kind of beautiful full circle where, at this point he's, had this really successful music career. And now he's making a film about, a scathing indictment of the music business, but also he's acting and playing this really like smarmy, very unlikable, but also like you said, riveting character. And then sort of returned and he had no intention of being an actor. He wasn't trying to be in this film. And De Palma was like, I think you might be great for this. I think you should try it. And so it was sort of a, okay, I guess I'll do it, but he didn't really want to do it. But then just how brilliant he is in this role, and just how, like you said, it just like, everything just comes together so well. And it's just so weird to see, I made this note of like somebody who is responsible for some of the most like impactful songs of our childhood playing this like, horny, sleazy, gross, like self-centered, like awful character, sort of the devil incarnate, literally almost. And yeah, I think that's just, it's a casting coup that was sort of unintended, but I think is, brilliant choice.
Yeah, it's truly one of my favorite pieces of casting in literally any movie. I think that the sequence where you see the video that Swan has to watch to stay young, he's so funny and he makes such smart, weird choices in that works so well and make it so so impactful, so acerbic, and so funny but kind of tragic at the same time, that just it's amazing. It's really incredible. And I was thinking that this is to De Palma's credit. His reveal of Swan is kind of gradual. Like, at first he feels kind of like, did you guys watch Inspector Gadget growing up?
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
And I want to start singing the song right now.
All right.
Yeah. Do you remember how like you never really saw the claw guy? You just kind of like
yeah,
you just see like a hand or something, and
the
like,
hand and the
I kind
cat
of felt
is all
like
you ever saw.
Yeah. In the beginning of the movie, I feel like Swan kind of has that energy of like we're building up to this, and then when De Palma reveals that it's Paul Williams, you're like, that's not what I was expecting.
Right.
At all.
Yeah.
Like a tiny little blonde man. But
yeah,
like it really works well. And not just in a way that's like kind of funny, but in a way that actually truly works. He manages to make that character feel deeply insidious and incredibly intelligent, but evil and devious.
One of the things that I think is really, this film has so many layers, which you wouldn't expect for it to have, but you know, that character of Swan was inspired heavily by Phil Spector. So this real life producer who is this monster. I mean, a murderer. So a pretty bad guy, but also like even before that, like just known as being a real schmuck, a real dickhead, a real awful person.
I believe he beat Ronnie pretty regularly.
Yeah. And yet like everyone wanted to work with him because he was a visionary. He was an artist. He was gifted. He like had a way with producing. And so he's working with the Beatles. He's working with all these like famous people who still flock to him. And I think that's really reflective of, you know, we talked about this, I think on the podcast before, of like all these brilliant filmmakers and artists who are very problematic in real life. And you have to figure out how to separate the art from the artist, but how prevalent the industry is with people who are geniuses, but also horrible human beings. Yeah.
Yep. So we talked off mic about the best kill. Mine is beef. I don't think anything compares to beef's, but did you guys feel differently? Did you have one that you thought trumped that? I mean, Swan's melting at the end is pretty amazing. Yeah,
that epic finale is really good, where they're like the dual death, and you know, but I mean, I agree. I think Beef is the best scene, but I
don't think you can
love the climactic ending as well.
So, what's your favorite song from the soundtrack?
Oh, two. Between two. Goodbye, Eddie, Goodbye, because it's fucking fantastic. Because
Great choice.
Again, it's doo-wop. It's if you didn't listen to the lyrics, you'd just be like, wow, this is really upbeat. Then you listen to the lyrics, you're like, oh fuck, you know. And then, but it's done so well that it just, again, if you weren't paying attention, you would think that this was a song that was written in the 50s by a greaser doo-wop band. That you would not know any better. And then, of course, for me, because I do feel that she is very good. I think the Special to Me song, her Phoenix's audition song, I think is incredible, because it's, you know, at least on the soundtrack, it doesn't quite come across this way, but in the movie, where she's getting into it, and she's at first, I mean, she belts it out, and she's a great singer from start to finish, but she's a little nervous at first, and then she kind of gets into it, and her weird fucking dancing gyrations notwithstanding,
and her floppy hat. It's
incredible to watch that this girl she wants to be a singer. That's all she wants. She doesn't want to be in the backup band. You know, she wants to sing. She doesn't want to get there on her back, which is fantastic. She wants to sing, and so she gets her chance. It's like, okay, Swan's like, give me your voice. Of course, he's talking literally. She doesn't know that, but she just fucking owns it. Like, she just goes in there, and all these girls that are there kind of auditioning against her are in the background nodding their heads and like tapping their feet and like getting into it, because she's that fucking good. And it's so, yeah, that song to me just like, it was incredible. Steph?
Okay, so it's between like 10 different songs.
Same.
So the entire soundtrack from start to
really
finish is the best
song. Yeah, start to finish, no notes.
Pooper to pooper. Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna tell you what my number one pick is, but I'm gonna point out a couple of other ones. So I think if I would look at it I think objectively the best song is Faust.
Yes.
I think the most fun to watch is Life at Last, because of how Beef performs it. Like, it's the song that I look forward to the most in the film. But my two actual favorites are the ones that I talked about before, which is the opening and closing, Goodbye, Eddie, Goodbye, and The Hell of It. For me, my favorite is, this is so weird to say because my favorite song in the soundtrack is the one that plays over the closing credits, which is the hell of it, which is kind of nutty. But I don't know. I just think it's so fucking like scathing and brilliant, and the lyrics are so extraordinary. And it just like, it's such a gut punch at the end of that film. And it's such a great way to tie everything up. And I wrote down this lyric, which I think is just like, but it says, life's a game where they're bound to beat you. And time's a trick they can turn to cheat you. And we only waste it anyway. And that's the hell of it. And my God, does that take my breath away? Like, that is just lyrically so satisfying and sinister and beautiful. So for me, if I have to pick one, which is very, very hard to do, that is the song that I like the most.
The hell of it actually has almost double the plays on Spotify as the next most played song.
Oh shit! Well,
what's the next most?
Goodbye, Eddie, Goodbye.
Really? It's not Faust.
953,000 plays for Goodbye, Eddie, Goodbye. 1,696,000 plays for the hell of it.
Wow, I'm shocked by that because I would have truly thought like Faust is so good. It's such an amazing standalone song. And if you hear the, specifically the Paul Williams version, he's just amazing. He sings the crap out of that song.
He does.
I know I could easily shout out every song in this movie, but I'm going to particularly mention the Phantom's theme because it's got a arguably cheesy set of lyrics that I think are beautiful and poetic. Where he says, to work it out, I let them in, all the good guys and the bad guys that I've been, all the devils that stirred me and the angels that defeated them somehow come together in me now, which is like next level beautiful. I think it's just like a gorgeous bit of poetry. And in the movie, they present it in a really interesting way in that Swan is auditioning different singers to do the cantata. And so you get to hear it in all of these different styles. There's kind of like a folky version and sort of a kind of Motown-y version, and then the beef glam version. And what it really drives home is that Paul Williams wrote a song that can't be bad, no matter what version you hear of it.
I'm glad you mentioned that scene because I forgot. I didn't forget about it, but I forgot to talk about it. And that is a really well executed scene. I really love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's behind in that spinning chair and he's just like turning to each new act.
Next. And I love the fact that they're live because back then they had to be live. They weren't beamed in on Spotify or beamed in on YouTube or, Zoom or anything. They had to be there. And I love how he just flips the light on. They're standing there in the dark waiting for their turn to prove themselves. And he flips the light on and they get 10 seconds to do their thing. And he's like, nope. Then he turns and flips the next light on and it's go. And nope. And it just, that scene is, I dare say, one of the most brilliant scenes of the movie, because if you want to talk about how scathing it is of the music industry and how dismissive these people come in with these dreams and some more talent than others, but they come in and they're like giving it their all. And it's 10 seconds of you get to try it. And then it's like back in the dark. No, like it's just like that is.
And then it's just the showman who gets his attention. Like it's the one who comes in with all the glam and the flair and not necessarily the most talented.
Who actually can't play guitar for shit, but he sells it on his image. It's like, it's not about the music. It's about the image, and it's like, oh yeah.
Right. But we all agree that beef is everything, obviously.
100%, 1,000,000%.
Like I can see it in my mind right now when he's taken off the plane in the coffin and they take the lid off and he's just making the most bonkers face I've ever seen. And he's got the like Marilyn Monroe mole on his cheek and he's covered in glitter and it's fantastic. I love it so much. It's so dumb and so incredible.
Agreed. Well, I don't want to rush us because this has been like wildly fun, but do we think we're at the point of like final thoughts of kind of summing up?
Yeah, we probably are. I mean, we shouldn't let me go on forever because I could. But all right, so Steph, why don't you start us off?
Okay. So I read a like retrospective on this film, and the headline was something that I fucking loved. It said, "The movie no one saw but everyone loves." Which is such a brilliant, description of this film that is widely, like, it's talked about in circles of being like this just insane, like nothing like it masterpiece, and yet being so underwatched. It's so like underappreciated. I was talking about that interview with Paul Williams where he says, if Phantom had been even a mild success, it would probably be gone by now, which is such a brilliant commentary on the fact that, you know, it was never like commercial. It was never like super digestible. It's artists talking about what it means to be an artist and the exploitation and the way that art is so devalued in favor of commerce. And it's a movie that talks about how like that, what is happening, that exploitation of the music industry, and it's not just music, it's everywhere, as we talked about. It's nothing new. It's been happening since the feudal days. It's a story that's as much a parable as it is a parody. And it's this almost like fairy tale like warning about the damage that celebrity can do to the psyche and what it's like to try to make it, and like how the forces are against you and how you are just a commodity and no one really cares about your art or your passion, or, you know, and it is very much De Palma's, like we talked about De Palma's voice coming through and saying like, I just want to make art and I want to be this, you know, filmmaker because I love films. And it's just this like, you know, commercial nightmarish machine that doesn't respect the process and doesn't like appreciate artists. And it's, you know, we're in a time now where we're in this dual strike and we have these like writers and actors and everybody trying to vie for it's not even, I mean, obviously it's about the money, but it's also just about like respect and appreciation for what they're bringing to the table and like having a seat at the table and being treated with the respect they deserve for making the art that is making so much freaking money. And you've got these people who are running these studios who are, you know, making these multi-billion-dollar salaries, and then people who are making the art who like can't afford to eat. And this is a film that, you know, even though it's pretty old by now, really speaks to that. And I feel like if this film was released today, it would feel modern and it would feel relevant and it would feel fresh, and it would really resonate in a lot of ways. I think, you know, we talked about this. I feel like this is such a perfect film on just about every level. And I really appreciate, Kelly, you picking this, because this is the very definition of a no notes film that deserves to be talked about and appreciated and respected for what it is. So that is my summation. Sorry if I went a little long.
I don't know.
No, that's fantastic.
I cannot follow.
Jack, you should go next, and I'll wrap it up.
God damn it. Okay, I mean, ditto.
The shoe is on the other foot. How the worm has turned.
Yeah, no, it's like, it's very possibly a perfect movie. Like everything that needed to be said, I think was said. And I think it had a lot of cards stacked against it as far as longevity. But especially as a creative, you know, trying to write and make something in this very saturated industry, I think it's very prescient. It hits home in a way that a lot of movies don't. I can watch a movie and I can relate to certain things, but as a creative, even though it's not the same medium, you know, getting overlooked and what's hot today is not hot tomorrow. And they're taking these three singers and they're rebranding them every time. Okay, now they're a beach rock. Now they're the Beach Boys. Okay, now they're the glam rock kind of goth rock kind of band. You know, it does feel very personal. But I don't think that you need to be a creative to get a lot out of this movie. It's interesting when you look at, you know, Paul Williams and the fact that, you know, a guy in black with a helmet has that whole aesthetic is like Daft Punk, and he's even featured on a couple of their songs on their like groundbreaking album. That they have these musicians, these modern electronic musicians, have this deep love and respect for a film, like you said, that nobody saw, you know. And I think that the cultural impact of this movie is very underappreciated because, again, it gets overshadowed by Rocky Horror, you know. And it's a shame because as good as Rocky Horror is, and I love Rocky Horror, and of course that movie kind of ended up being the kind of a tentpole and rallying cry for the LGBTQ community, which is fantastic, and I love that did that. Where this one has things to say and didn't necessarily get get to say them in a way that something like Rocky Horror did. And I think that is a shame, because there is, for as funny as it is and as kind of campy as it is and over the top as it is, this movie really does have something to say about the industry and about the chasing of fame and the price of fame. And I think it, especially in modern times, it's pretty damn important. And I think people need to see this. If you haven't seen it, I mean, you need to watch it because it's a fucking amazing movie, but you need to watch it because it actually has something to say.
Me?
You,
Go.
girl.
All right. So I'm going to real quick dip back into the Rocky Horror thing, and I promise this will be my last statement on it. I think it's an interesting point of comparison because I do think that not just Swan, but in general, to some degree, Phantom of the Paradise is saying nostalgia is a dangerous impulse. And I love Rocky Horror, but it's 100% nostalgia and the romanticization of nostalgia. It's all celebrations of old movies and older music genres, despite the fact that there is an astonishing Tim Curry and Spike Teals and of course the movie is actually surprisingly retro, even at the time, kind of 50s chic. That's the last thing I'm going to say about that. I think that Phantom is angrier, and I think maybe people responded more to the lightheartedness of Rocky Horror, and the angriness, the bitterness of Phantom didn't get through. It got through to me. I so applaud Steph and Jack's deep, incisive deconstructions and commentary on the movie. I'm going from a much more holistic viewpoint. Everything you said was right. Every goddamn thing you said was right. But I got to tell you, from the first time I saw that movie to the 900th time I've watched it, I'm just overwhelmed with joy watching it. Thinking somebody just took everything they liked in art, every weird aspect, musicals, Faust, Phantom of the Opera, glam rock, other weird shit, slapstick comedy, and they threw all of it at the wall and just said, whatever happens, happens. I think as a person who has a lot of trouble with the idea of writing to focus groups and writing what's going to sell, and instead focuses more on writing what makes me happy and what I feel proud of at the end of the day, I think it's so beautiful that Brian De Palma, as a young filmmaker, was just like, fuck it. I'm making the goddamn movie I want to make. And as such, I feel like you feel it. To me, I feel it every time I watch it. There is great commentary and there is incisive statements, but also it's just really fun. Like, it's a really fun movie. You get to see a car explode. You get to see a guy get his face deformed. You hear good music. You see Paul Williams giving the performance of a lifetime. You get to see a rock opera, or at least half of one. And like, for me, what more could you want? I'm just filled with joy when I watch it. It makes me so happy. Everything about this movie speaks to my soul.
You just saying it's fucking joy-inducing is the absolute best review possible. And really the only review that's needed is just like, go watch it, because it's like life-affirming. It's just such an absolute joy. Like you said, I think that's a brilliant way to surmise what this film is. Now we get to find out what we're talking about next. And Jack is going to step up to the plate to share one of his beloved cinematic treasures. And I cannot wait to hear where we go from here. So Jack.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, I'm like, if I had a tail, I'd be wagging it. So Steph's choice made us feel really good. You can't, if you watch, if you watch any of Miyazaki's movies, but especially if you watch My Neighbor Totoro, and you don't come away feeling better about life, then there's something seriously fucking wrong with you. Where Kelly's choice made us want to sing, because there's some scathing commentary there, and there's some kind of dark looks at the industry there, but ultimately it's fucking catchy and it's fun, and it's you want to sing, you want to tap your foot, you want to dance. It does all those things. So we have the feel good and we have the music, and my choice is going to be like a kick in the figurative nuts.
Oh boy.
So
Why am I not
Alright.
surprised?
I know, right? So we examine the dark side of chasing fame and success in the music industry with Phantom of the Paradise, which is fantastic. Mostly from the production side of the house. I'm going to get this music any way I can and screw the person that created it kind of thing. And my film is going to explore the other side of that coin, where we're mostly looking at the musician's point of view and what he's willing to put himself through in the pursuit of his dream, which isn't outside of the movie and outside of this specific industry. It's not this world changing where he's going to write the next Tommy. He's not going to write the next Rocky Horror. He just wants to get into a prestigious music school. That's it. But for him, and in the confines of this movie, that is everything. So
Oh my God, I know what we're talking
smaller
about.
stakes. Okay. So my choice is 2014's Whiplash
Yes.
with J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller. I try to talk about this movie with people who haven't seen it without spoiling it, where I tell them, like, it is the most tense movie you will ever see, and there's not a single gun, kidnap, rape, any of the things that we would normally associate tense in modern cinema. There's none of that here. It's literally a contest of two wills coming together in a very ugly kind of ultimately potentially damaging way, and the aftermath of that. And so it is one of my all-time favorite movies, just by virtue of ultimately it's a low stakes, small stakes movie, but when you watch this movie, it is everything. And both of those actors just fucking bring it. So I'm assuming, Steph, you've seen it.
I have seen it, yes.
Kelly, have you seen it?
I sure haven't.
Yes.
And I knew what
So excited.
I knew what you were going to say, but I don't know if it's the result of having alternated between beer and Red Bull all night. But my brain knew what movie you were talking about, and I could not come up with the phrase whiplash for the life of me. And I was like, "Oh, it's Whippersnapper."
Well, that's how we're going to
watch Whippersnapper.
We're going to watch Whippersnapper.
That's our show. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed this foray into film passion. If you like what you heard, please consider giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify or a 5-star review on iTunes to help more people discover it. And remember, in a mad, mad world, movies help remind us of our humanity and capacity for great beauty. Film criticism is important, but film celebration is essential. Until next time, take note of the movies that matter and join us in proudly proclaiming no notes.
Yep.
And I say that as a person who weirdly walks around my house often saying, "I write my songs for Phoenix."
I
And
think
that
we
tells
found
you
our
everything you
soundbite.
need to know about Kelly right there.